Okay. into space. First of all, 35 years ago, a young engineer standing on the deck of the mobile launch platform over by the vehicle assembly and watched Challenger lift off. Beautiful cold morning, but tragedy, of course, hit very soon after liftoff. Witnessing that event stayed with me my entire career, never left, and they never do. We all remember where we were when Challenger lifted off. I was just an entry-level engineer here at KSC and knew the astronauts only by name and from TV. 17 years later, I was standing beside the runway waiting for Columbia to come home from her mission, and she simply didn't come home. I'll never forget the feeling there of one of complete emptiness as we waited for Columbia. Didn't come home. I watched the families get out of the stands. It was just an awful, awful moment. I was the shuttle launch director for Columbia at the time. This time they were my friends, and I was theirs. So today I'd like to talk about the astronauts and some of the folks at KSC as we move forward. First, of course, I think about the astronauts, forever remembered here. I think about my friends and those I never met. I knew some of the astronauts. I didn't know them all, of course. But I think about how diverse they were as a group of people, different nationalities, races, genders, different faiths and beliefs. At the same time, I think about the one thing they all had in common, and I ask you all to think about this with me. These were men and women, ordinary people, doing extraordinary things. They had children, they had mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters. These were ordinary people doing extraordinary things. They had hopes and dreams that were cut short. They had a love of life that was cut short as well. They did daily chores. They represented their countries to the rest of the world. These men and women were about to take the ultimate risk for the benefit of everyone. It was a fact I always try to remember the rest of my career, especially on launch day. These ordinary people doing extraordinary things left their families so empty. We owe the families so much. Cheryl, thank you. Another thought comes to mind as I stand here in front of this mirror, which I've done quite a bit over the last year or so. Before the pandemic anyway, I was giving tours at the Atlantis building, and I'd stop by here at least once a month and just reflect on the astronauts and what they went through and what the country's been through and really the world. And I always think about the people here at the Kennedy Space Center and indeed around the country who worked on the space shuttle and other space vehicles, not just here at KSC, but all the other centers and all the contractor organizations. The people that thought about, did I do my job right on the day that we lost Challenger and Columbia, Apollo 1? The astronauts put their lives in line, trusting thousands of people they barely knew or knew not at all. These people put their heart and soul into working on the vehicles, and they lost their friends, their associates, and their space vehicles. As a career-long employee, I know how much the entire workforce here and as I say, around the country, cared so much for the astronauts and put their heart and soul into working on these vehicles to do the job as best they could. And the astronauts, mindful of what it meant to be a true team, would come to the Kennedy Space Center, walk around, talk to people, thank them for the work that they do. And the astronauts wouldn't talk about themselves. They'd talk to the folks about their families, about their kids. Maybe they'd go out for lunch or to a local beer joint after work and just gather and have friendship and fellowship. They would share their stories. Those are the times I miss the most, I believe. The times just interacting with the astronauts, because they were real people, and we should never forget that. And that fact never left me, nor will leave any member of the launch team or any member of the Kennedy Space Center. We were working on their behalf. We tried all we could to bring them home safely every time. Excuse me. Kind of awkward. We would all watch as they launched, as their missions unfolded. We waited for the missions to end safely. They're back here out in California. From the technician turning the proverbial bolt on the spacecraft to safety professionals, engineers, managers, all alike, all of us would never celebrate until the astronauts were home safely, reunited with their loved ones. So the astronauts and the workforce are all just ordinary people working together, doing extraordinary things on behalf of the country and the world. It was our job and profession, but so very much more than that. It was our passion of the astronauts, passion of the workforce. So as I stand here and reflect on the astronauts and the good folks at KSC and around the country, I have but one wish. I wish we will never have to add another name to this wall, to this mirror. It's plenty full. It's already too full. Thank you.
I'm good.
Gotta let me do it.
Thank you, Mike. It was nearly at this moment, this very, very moment, as we sit here 35 years ago, hundreds of thousands of people across the Space Coast, lining our beaches and their backyards, workers here at KSC, we're watching the countdown. And in just a few minutes, we will have that 35-year anniversary. And we saw that horrific, tragic event. And we had millions, tens of millions of people across the globe watching, and millions of school children watching the first teacher, the first civilian to be launched in space. And NASA so appropriately chose a teacher. Teachers that reach out and inspire our youth. And they all witnessed a life-changing experience. Perhaps no other generation had such an intimate experience with such a tragic and life-changing moment as these children. And what was born out of that was a generation dedicated to human spaceflight. And what inspires me are the family members, the biggest proponents and advocates for maintaining spaceflight and human exploration are those families who've paid the ultimate sacrifice, losing a loved one. And that's inspiring to all of us. So as we remember our astronauts and we have the tolling of the bell ceremony, we here at the Kennedy Space Center, at this point in time, at this place, 35 years later, we'll remember the astronauts of the Space Shuttle Challenger, as well as all the astronauts on our board, on the wall, who have sacrificed their life for spaceflight. I will recite the names. Theodore C. Freeman. Charles A. Bassett II. Elliot M. C. Jr. Clifton C. Williams, Jr. Virgil Gus Grissom. Edward H. White II. Roger B. Chaffee. Michael J. Adams. Robert H. Lawrence, Jr. Francis Dick Scobie. Michael J. Smith. Judith A. Resnick. Ellison S. Onizuka. Ronald E. McNair. Gregory B. Jarvis. S. Krista McCullough. Manly L. Sonny Carter, Jr. Rick D. Husband. William C. McCool. Michael P. Anderson. Kalpana Chawla. David M. Brown. Laurel Clark. Elan Ramon. Michael T. Alsbury. And now we will place a wreath at the base of the memorial to honor those who have sacrificed their lives in the pursuit of space exploration, followed by 1 minute of silence. Thank you so much. Thank you for your presence here today, and thank you for those who are watching as NASA streams on their Facebook Live. This concludes this morning's ceremony. You may now pay your respects by entering the ramp, single file, asking everyone to socially distance as much as you possibly can, to place your flower that you have in your possession here on the memorial fence. It's a tradition that we have every year here at the Astronaut Memorial Foundation for the NASA Day of Remembrance. Once you place your flower, we ask you to single file, socially distance, depart down the east ramp. Again, thank you for attending this year's Day of Remembrance. We're blessed to have had this. You know, given the pandemic, we were concerned, but we were committed to having this here in front of the memorial. And thank you for joining us.
Say